Hi everyone. In this episode of The Curious Coconut, we're joined by Lea Gaffen, a passionate advocate supporting individuals with vision impairments and mental health challenges in Florida. Lea shares her journey with RP, retinitis pigmentosa, and the technology she relies on a day-to-day basis. Together, we explore the impact on her life and the importance of support networks for those with disabilities. Join us for inspiring insights from Lea's advocacy and personal experiences. Without any further ado, here's the episode.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Curious Coconut podcast. Today we are joined by Lea Gaffen. Welcome to the show. And do you want to quickly introduce yourself? Tell us about what you like to do, where are you from, and things like that.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Lea. I am 48 years old and I'm originally from the Washington, D.C. area, Northern Virginia. I currently live in Florida. I enjoy doing yoga, working out, playing with my guide dog, playing with my kitties, walking on the beach, seeing movies, that type of thing.
And do you want to tell us a bit about your career journey? What have you done in the past and what you're doing right now?
Sure. So first of all, I have RP, which is a degenerative eye disease. And when I went to college, I majored in English. And in my 20s, I went through some personal challenges and I went to some counselors to help me figure out some things. And I realized that maybe this was a better career choice for me. And so on a whim, I applied for a master's in social work program just to see if I would get in. I got in, and then I started the courses, and it really was intriguing to me. All the courses were very interesting, and I graduated with my master's in social work, and I worked for the county where I was living in Virginia in their prevention services department, where I worked with at-risk kids in the school system. And what was interesting about that job was I had to drive these kids to some outdoor activities. And at the time, my vision was deteriorating, but I was trying to hide it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to drive. I mean, I drove during the day, but I did not drive at night. And what I was anxious about was driving the kids in this like van. And so I tried to avoid it as much as possible. And I made it work. I had my program and it worked well for about 3 years. Then I moved into a school social work position where I was school-based, and I didn't have to drive kids anymore, which was huge. And I worked
Yeah.
in a school system, and I had my responsibilities there. And over the course of time, with my vision loss, things began to get harder and harder. And the job description sort of began to morph a little bit more into more crisis oriented. First of all, we had to do a lot of helping with special education and treatment and assessment for special education services in the schools. And but then also like I had to be in charge of depression screenings or a lot of mental health evaluations, or noticing if a kid was suicidal, crisis management type of stuff, as well as assessing kids to see if we had to call child protective services. It's just sort of the different roles that I had to play in the school social worker realm were getting harder and harder as my vision got deteriorated more and more. And I realized that at a certain right around the pandemic in 2020, before the pandemic, actually, I had sort of made this mental decision that I was going to explore going on disability retirement, which is through the school system where I was working, was sort of they had a disability insurance type of program. So I was going to try that. But then the pandemic hit in March of 2020, and everything went virtual. And I was like, oh, maybe I can do it because it's virtual. Because a big part of the problem was navigating around the school buildings and running into classrooms and assessing these kids as they write in light pencil, if their drawings were suicidal ideation or just a drawing, like things that you had to use your eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And given the magnitude of some of these situations, I didn't feel comfortable being responsible because I didn't trust that my vision was good enough. And so then when things went virtual, I was like, oh, well, it's just looking at a computer screen. That should be fine. But it became just as hard because the time period that you needed to navigate some of these apps that we were doing, it takes me longer to do them. For example, it takes me a while to find the mouse pointer on my screen, whereas other people do it quick, and they're already like they're already, especially the kids, working with the kids online, I was taking forever. And so in October of 2020, I moved forward with applying for retirement disability. But prior to all of that, I skipped over. In 2013, I started doing private practice counseling on the side, like as a second job on Saturdays, because that was always what I had wanted to do, was the private practice, which is like meeting one-on-one individually with people. And so I started that at an agency, and that ended up being pretty successful, which made me really happy. It was a lot of work because I was working with the schools Monday through Friday, and then Saturday I was doing the private practice. But the private practice was like my own business. So I really liked that. And I did that at the agency until about 2018. And then I did some work from home with that, had people come to like this separate area of my house and met with people one-on-one that way. And so I did that for a while. And then, like I said, in 2020, I left the schools and I decided to do the disability retirement. And over the last couple of years, I moved to Florida after that was approved in 2021. Now I do some volunteer support groups for people with vision impairments, and that's really a passion of mine, is helping people deal with the mental health side of vision loss. Because I think one thing I experienced during the pandemic, all these sort of, like I was connected with a division of blind and vision impairment in Virginia at the time, and they were saying, they were very like focused on resources. And I was thinking, I don't even feel comfortable accessing the resources because I just feel stuck in the fact that I don't want to have to,
It's just the
So
acceptance fact, right?
yeah. So it was, I was like, you know what? This is a topic that no one seems to talk about. And I can't imagine I'm the only one who feels this way. So that's why when I moved to Florida, I reached out to the Foundation Fighting Blindness chapter president and said, could we do a virtual support group? And because I have the background of counseling, I said, I'll be happy to lead it, but let's see if anyone's interested. And so we have about 8 people in it now. And and then I did another podcast, which was shared with my local county where I live in Florida, and a few people from the local county are interested in being part of a support group. So I'm going to start a second one for them in a couple of weeks. And I just think support groups are so vital for people with vision loss, because so many of us, we don't drive, and it's easy to isolate and feel like you're alone. But it's so important to realize we're not alone. So
Sorry, for this private support group that you've created, the private counseling that you had, people one-on-one, was this also for people with visual impairments, or was this sort of like general for people who were mentally sort of unstable?
yeah, so it wasn't just for people with vision impairments. When I did it one-on-one, it was for people with anxiety and depression mostly. or other mental health disorders, because the challenge with doing one-on-one with people with vision loss is a lot of them either the insurance and payment becomes very complicated. And also this is all prior to like everything, Zoom being a thing, having them come to see me, they need to get rides. And I wasn't really marketing myself in that direction at the time. I was on several insurance panels, and there are a lot of people in the world dealing with other mental health issues. And it became sort of, first come, first serve, basically. I mean, so if they inquired and I had openings, I took them and I met with them until they didn't need me anymore. And so to answer your question, no, it wasn't for people with vision impairments.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, before we go any further, I want to ask, like, for anyone who doesn't know, can you explain a bit about retinitis pigmentosa and how that kind of affects your vision? And at like what age did you start noticing the impacts of it?
Sure. So retinitis pigmentosa is a degenerative eye disease where the rods and the cones in your eyes, which affect your night vision and color vision, deteriorate over time. And eventually, and I'm certainly not giving a scientific explanation, but all I
That's
know
okay.
is it's inherited. It's a genetic disease. My mom has it, but no one else besides my mom and myself and the entire extended family has it. And the way that I found, so when I was growing up, I felt like I didn't see at night as well as my friends, but I didn't know if that was just me being anxious or if that was really the problem. And so I think my parents took me to a doctor who said they really didn't know. And, I sort of came to the conclusion it was all in my head. But then I went to college, and you do a lot of going out at night and stuff like that in college, or I did. And I decided I really needed to know for a fact if this was all in my head or not. So I was officially diagnosed with RP when I was 22. And the way they diagnosed me is they use this contraption called an electroretinogram, where they put these like contact lens things in your eyes and they flash a bunch of lights, and they determine I guess, the rate at which your eye adapts to the lights. And so anyway, I was diagnosed at that time, and I said, oh, and I was kind of sad, but it was validating because I was like, oh, it's not all in my head.
Yeah, so
And
you have reason for it.
yeah, so I was diagnosed at 22, and at that point I was still driving. I was still able to see pretty well during the day, but I stopped driving at night. And because it's degenerative, so over the course of the past, since I've been diagnosed, it's like slowly the peripheral vision goes and the night vision goes. And now I'm at the point where I have very little just central vision, but I am able to read with glasses. I'm able to see, better. It's just such a spectrum. Like some people with RP only have light perception. Some people don't see at all. Some people can see perfectly fine. So with mine, it's like I said, I can read with glasses, but I need to use a white cane or
I just have a question about like how is the white cane, like using a white cane, different from like using a guide dog?
again, back to my own attitude about going blind or losing my eyesight. I felt like using a white cane was like really uncomfortable, almost like it was a stigma.
Okay.
And so I had orientation mobility training, and then I kind of did it, and then I put away the white cane and was like pretending I didn't need it. Um, and then when I started at a different school, so this is still when I'm working for the school system, I went to a different school and I really needed to use the white cane. And I said, I need to expose myself and desensitize because I was feeling a lot of anxiety as though other people were judging me or whatever when I was using the white cane. So
Yeah.
I had the orientation mobility person, excuse me, come to my school where I was working. And I almost forced myself to be accountable to use it in front of other people to try to desensitize myself. And
Mm.
we did this a few times. And then the orientation mobility instructor said, you might want to apply for a guide dog. And I said, but isn't that just for people who have no eyesight at all? And she's like, no, you're legally blind. You can apply for a guide dog. So I said, oh, I really had no idea about it. So then I investigated and I ended up applying and I was approved, but I was put on the wait list for like 2 years, like I said.
Mm,
And then
two
I got her
years.
name. Yeah, well, it takes a long time to get a guide dog, and especially I had applied right before the pandemic, so things were shut down for a while
Oh,
anyway.
yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Um, but the way that a dog is different is she is like pulling you.
Mm.
So,
Mhm.
like, I took a walk with her this morning, and we're walking, and if there's a rock in front of me that I don't see, she'll pull me around it.
Okay.
So versus a cane, you're sort of using the cane in front just to detect what's there. I would come across it and move around it. But the dog, it's like almost like when you use a human guide, when you're holding onto someone's arm and they kind of move you around. That's kind of
Mm.
what the
Yeah.
dog does. So I like it better because I trust her a little bit more than I trust myself. And you kind
Yeah.
of go around the obstacles versus having to feel them and then figure out what they are.
Hmm.
And also, I think just because she's an animal and she, everywhere I go, people are, if I bring her, they're like, oh, everybody has a story about a dog or their lab because she's a black lab, they'll say,
Hmm.
oh, I had a black lab. So it sort of takes the rough edge out of the whole thing. It kind of makes
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
something cute to look at. Um,
Yeah. Dogs are just adorable wherever they
yeah,
are.
I mean, I feel like everywhere, everyone likes dogs. I mean, she's
Hmm.
well trained. She doesn't, she's not an annoying dog where she's barking all the time. She's very quiet and polite and all that. So, like I was flying somewhere, like I've flown with her on, traveled on airlines, and I was sitting in the waiting area to get on a plane, and the pilot of the plane comes up and sits next to me, and I'm intimidated because he's the pilot. And he's like, tells me all about his dog. I like everybody, just random strangers always have stories about their dogs. They've had labs, etc. And it's nice.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
one says that about their white cane, like, oh, I had a white, so and the other thing about having a dog that's good for me is um like a cane you can sort of fold up and put away. Like a dog, you
Hmm.
can't do that, right?
Oh, yeah.
So
Dog is staying with you.
she's staying with you and you take it out and she's going to help you and that's that, so it's a
Hmm.
little um it takes more of the stigma out of the whole thing for me.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
why I
Mm,
like the
I
dog.
think it also makes it like your vision loss a bit more bearable, right? Like,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, because it brings something good into my life which helps me. um
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
how I find it. So I really prefer having the guide dog. I mean, there is a responsibility factor too. You have to take her out, you have to feed her, you have to get her groomed and whatever, but
mm.
I don't
Hmm.
mind any of that. To me,
You
it's
can't just
worth it.
say no to walking your dog, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you do have to take her out. Like I live in a condo, so I have to take her downstairs to do her business and all that stuff.
Mhm.
But it overall it's great. I really enjoy having her.
Yeah. Um, how is it traveling with the dog actually? Getting around, can that be hard for you sometimes, or
Well,
what's
she's
your experience
actually
like?
more help. Yeah, she's really helpful. So like we've traveled on planes, both like with my husband or just with me. My
Mhm.
dog and I have just traveled. And what we do is if we're on, traveling by air, we'll take advantage of, like, they have accessible services at the airport, and I don't need a wheelchair, but like I'll follow, she does a really good job following someone. So we'll
Mm-hmm.
follow them because if I'm just by myself, like I can't get through TSA myself and find the gate and all that. It's such a challenge. So I take advantage of that, and she does a good job. She sits well on the airplane. She's good because, like I said, she'll help me avoid obstacles. She'll help me stay on the side of the road. Like, for example, I was just in Northern Virginia last week, and walking around that neighborhood, which I like to do, there's no sidewalks. And it's like black tar or asphalt next to like dirt. So depending on
Mm-hmm.
how the sun hits it, I don't see the contrast. So if I walk with Marston, she's trained to walk on the left side of the road. She'll keep
Mm-hmm.
me on the asphalt. Whereas if I was doing it myself, I'd probably, even with the cane, go off and on. I'd have to
Mm-hmm.
really notice where the dirt is so that I don't end up in a ditch. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I have a quick
So
question. Like, does the dog also know when like the light turns green and you're able to walk? Like, 'cause,
no,
there's
no, she
no?
doesn't know that. She knows to stop at curbs. She
Yeah.
knows, like, I'll say to her, find the post. Like if we're going to a crosswalk, she can help
Mm-hmm.
me find where the post where I push the walk signal is. But
Mm-hmm.
I have to either use my eyes or an app, which I use to help identify, like, when the pedestrian signal allows me to cross, and
Yeah.
then I have to tell her to go. So no, she's not that smart.
Okay.
I mean, she's super smart, but she's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
able to, like, find an address. I can't be like, find 666 this number or whatever,
Yeah, yeah.
River Street. Like, she won't know that, and she doesn't know the pedestrian walk signal. But I imagine if I did the same route enough, she would pick up certain signals. Like, for example, when, like, there's an intersection where I cross with her, and all
Mm-hmm.
the cars stop when it's time to cross. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
imagine if I did that enough, she would pick up on that because she's very big on routine. But yeah, at the moment I have to tell her when to go.
Yeah, in Melbourne it's like really easy because there's like audio, like an audio thing that goes off every time it's your turn to cross. So you don't really need to like see across the street. You can just listen to that, and that's when you know it's your time to cross the street. So
Yeah, I applied. Some intersections here have that, some don't. And when I
yeah,
moved
yeah.
down to this place, I requested audio signals, but like, everything takes forever. So they say it's a
Yeah.
process, but they have to, like, design it, and I don't know. So every few months I send an email just checking in, and they're like, oh, we're
Yeah.
75% through this phase 2. And I'm like, okay, so then when will they be installed? And then they're like, oh yeah, but we have to do phase 3. And I'm like, oh God.
Yeah, yeah.
So for
Takes a long
now,
time.
it's I found this app called Oko, OKO, I think is how it's
Yeah.
spelled. And you just you use your phone's camera to help identify when the walk signal is like
Oh,
good for you to
that's
go,
interesting.
and when it has, like, the hand where you are supposed to stop, and it
Hmm.
beeps a certain way when you're ready to cross. So
Hmm.
it's really a game changer because it's really
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, I guess technology is changing, making it easier to get in a deal with these types of disabilities. But yeah, do you want to talk a bit about the tools you use on a day-to-day basis, navigate your life, and live somewhat of a normal life?
Yeah. So I really am committed to live a normal, quote unquote, normal life.
Hmm.
So what I do is, so besides the guide dog, so that's really important when I navigate outside of my house,
Hmm.
um, having that type of thing, but having that support. But, like, for example, I use Mac product or Apple products, and they have a
Yeah.
lot of good accessibility features just built right in.
Mm-hmm.
So I have an Apple laptop computer and I don't use voiceover yet 100% of the time. And
Yeah.
voiceover is for people who are visually impaired who can't read the screen. It just speaks out everything on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a little intimidating to me because it's so it seems very complicated because you have to swipe a certain way to have it do one thing and swipe up and down for something else. It's like its own language.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, you
I
had to
think
learn
that
it.
it takes time. So what I do now, I can read with glasses, like I said. So I use my iPhone and I just make everything bigger and higher contrast. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I have something on there called spoken content, which is one of the accessibility features where it's like voiceover, but you just turn it on when you need it and then you turn it off and it'll read me anything that's like too small or too light for me to read.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, there's some new apps, or they aren't new, but there's some new AI features on like there's an app called Seeing AI, which is very helpful to read like letters I get in the mail. You have toggle buttons at the bottom. It'll take a picture of the content of the letter, and then it'll either read it to me or have it on my screen with on my phone screen, which again is like high contrast and large font, so I'm able to read it more easily.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there's Be My AI, which is part of it's like Be My Eyes, which is an app where it connects you to people who are volunteers and you can show your camera and they can tell you that they kind of access your camera and you can point it at something and they'll give you verbal information about what you're pointing the camera at. But they have an AI feature now on that app where again you take a picture of something and it'll describe it for you and it does a really good job, especially with colors. I have a hard time differentiating especially dark colors from each other,
Mm-hmm.
and so I just played around with the Be My Eyes AI button, took a picture of some like navy pants and blue pants and black pants, and it like
Yep.
described it like using the color, and I was really
Oh.
impressed because I was like, oh, it got it right. So
That's great.
yeah, so I do think technology is really helpful. Um, and oh, I didn't mention back to the traveling with my guide dog. So I don't drive, so I have to use rideshare like Uber or Lyft, to travel, like if I'm out somewhere, if I don't have a ride. And recently I had an issue where I was at a mall and I called Lyft to take me home, and the driver saw my dog and drove right off. And
Oh,
yeah, so that's a problem.
yeah.
And then I was able to contact them again to get because I needed to get a ride home. But at that point it had turned into surge pricing because it was like right before the
Yeah,
surge
yeah.
pricing, and that was really annoying. But I was like, I need a ride home, so it is what it is. And then
Mm-hmm.
when the car pulled up, I immediately got in and the driver questioned me about the dog. And I explained it's a seeing eye dog and she'll be well. And I think he would have thrown me out. However, I was like already in the car. So when I got to my destination, I contacted Lyft and complained, and they were very gracious and they explained that they're going to do everything they can to make sure the drivers know. And I think they refunded my money, but it was just sort of like that is a hazard that happens with having a dog because
Mm.
a lot of the drivers don't want the dog in their car. They think, I don't know what they think, but when I travel with her, she's trained to sit on the floorboards at my feet and she doesn't say a word and she's not a barky dog or anything like that. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just sort of a preconceived idea that they're going to
Yeah.
shed, they're going to mess up their car or whatever.
Yeah, like the drivers don't know that, right? Like that's a eye seeing eye dog. It's just They just see a dog and it's like, oh, I don't
Yeah.
want to deal with that, and they drive off.
Exactly. And I get what they're where they're coming from. Like I've had one driver one time was like, you should have used Uber Pet because I guess there's a separate,
Oh,
Oh, I
you
I
never
know,
didn't
knew
even
about
know
like
that
that
either.
existed.
Yeah.
yeah, I know that apparently there is, but they charge you more, but it's not a pet. You know, I had to
Yeah.
explain
Mm,
she's a guide dog. She's, you know, kind of an accessibility device. And
Hmm.
um, so I can get where they're coming from, but they also, I don't think they understand the difference because when I'm traveling with her, she has her harness on. So it's not like
Hmm.
she's just on a leash and just sitting there. She has a
mm,
harness on. She's trained to sit on the floor. It's not like she's sitting all over their seats. And maybe there needs to be more training with Uber and Lyft so that they can learn, so they can teach their drivers the difference
Hmm.
between a genuine service dog, and it's sort of a
just
dog
like a
people are
pet.
calling a service dog, which
Yeah.
isn't really a service dog.
Hmm.
Mm. I was going to
Yeah.
ask you a similar question, whether there have been instances where apps that you've been using um kind of infuriate you. I guess you kind of answered that question. Are there any other instances where there are applications that you're kind of disappointed with and wish they had more support?
Well, before the Be My Eyes AI feature, I was really disappointed with Be My Eyes. And in fact, I
Okay.
also have another app called Lyra. I mean, not Lyra, Ira, AIRA, where it's like Be My Eyes, but the people who you connect with are paid. So they're a little more knowledgeable, or they at least act a little more knowledgeable.
Mhm.
Because at one point I tried Be My Eyes and they connect you with a volunteer, and the volunteer was like, I don't know. Like he was kind of like he didn't seem really interested in helping me,
Mm.
which was like, well, then why are you volunteering? Um, but with Ira also, a good thing is that's how I get my Lyft in Uber. Ira has a connection with Lyft. So if I use Ira, I tell them, can you get me a Lyft? So because
Hmm.
the
Mm,
Lyft and Uber apps are very small print and it's very
Hmm.
hard to see. And then if you have to type in an address, um, it's very cumbersome for visually impaired
Yeah.
people, or at least for me. So it's worth it to me to pay for Ira and then have you just hit a large button to call them and then just say, I need a lift. And then they'll
Okay.
say, okay, they'll put in your destination, they'll do all of it, and then they just step out and then you get the ride.
Oh,
Um,
that's really interesting. I
yeah.
have a quick question about Be My Eyes. So is
Mhm.
it like they just connect you with someone in real time, so that as you're holding up your camera, they can see and then they just guide you, right? That's how it
Yep.
works?
Yep, that's
Okay.
how, I mean, they don't really guide you. There's a disclaimer, like if you're at a traffic intersection, you can't hold it up and say, can I walk now? Like you have to,
Okay.
they don't want that liability type of
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, if I was like at a strip mall, for example, and I said, am I in front of the ice cream store or am I in front of the hardware store? Like I would hold my camera up so that they could see and they'd say, oh, you're in front of the ice cream store. Um,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
or like if I needed help determining colors, like I could hold the camera up to close and say, is this red or is this navy? And they'd be like, oh, it's
Hmm.
red. So that it's a really good service to have. Um,
Hmm.
Ira, like I said, is like that, but it's a little different in that they seem to have more access to like maps, or maybe they Google more. Like I was in a store a couple of years ago and it was a large superstore and I needed to find cat litter. And I walked in and I was like overwhelmed and I was by myself. So I used Ira and I said, hey, I'm in this store. Can you help me find cat litter? And they somehow went on the store's they found the layout of the store somehow and they said,
Oh,
okay, go to
wow.
the back. Yeah, it was super cool.
That's
And then
crazy. Yeah.
yeah, I would like held up the phone to the shelf and they're like, okay, what do you want? You want unscented litter? It's on the top left. I was like,
Mm.
thank you.
Wow.
It was so helpful to
That's
have
great.
that
Mm,
Yeah.
because go to some of these like large superstores and it's like going to a football field and you're like, all I
Yeah,
want
it can be
is one
crazy.
thing. So those apps are just game changers. And I do
Mm.
feel like, it's unfortunate that I have this disease, but if I'm going to have it, this is of course, a better time than ever to have it
Oh, yeah, for sure.
because there are Uber and Lyft, you don't have to rely on a taxi. There are
Hmm.
these apps. There are, accessibility tools that, of course, weren't available like 20 years ago. So
Yeah, yeah.
I feel fortunate in that way.
Yeah, another quick question that just came in. So like let's say you're going to a mall that you're unfamiliar with, right? How would
Mhm.
you go about finding the store you want to go to or something that you're looking for?
So what I would probably do before going to the mall is I would look online at the website and see, like, get an idea of where the anchor stores are, like Macy's or whatever, and then kind of get a gist of the general layout.
Hmm.
So that I know if I'm near Macy's that like this store is near there or whatever. But that only helps so much because then you get to the mall and you're like, okay, where the hell is the Macy's? But
Yeah.
then I would, what else? I definitely ask for help if I got lost
Hmm.
in the mall, or I would use the Ira or Be My Eyes for help. But that's pretty much it. Like if I'm with my guide dog, she would help guide me around. But again, she doesn't know where, like if I'm looking
Yeah,
for
where
the
you want to
Apple
go.
store, I can't say, find the Apple store. Although
Yeah.
interestingly with her, if I go to the Apple store once and I mark it, that like you mark it in a certain way, then next time I go to the mall and I say, find the Apple store, she'll be able to find it.
Oh, that's so cool.
That's very
Yeah.
cool. Like if I go to a hotel room and, and then I'm like, take her out to do her business and then I come back and I mark it, then from then on, she knows where the room is. So I'll
Wow.
say,
Mm,
find
yeah.
the room and she'll find it. It's super cool.
That's fascinating
That's yeah,
stuff.
that's really
Yeah.
amazing. Um, yeah,
Uh,
I think okay, let's sort of change up the topics. I want to talk a bit more about mental health, because
Mhm,
that's a major part of what you do as well.
mhm.
Um, yeah, so do you want to talk a bit about like how your vision, like losing your vision impacted your mental health and how, visual loss can generally impact other people's mental health?
Sure. So, um, like I said, I went through some personal stuff in my 20s, and I think some of it was related to vision loss, but it was also just a rough time in general. I think for a lot of
Yeah.
people, you kind of go through high school and everything, and everyone's like, oh, yeah, after you graduate college, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And then you graduate college and you're like, oh, no, now what do I do?
Yeah,
Um,
that's us right now.
yeah, so that was just a rough time for me, and I started seeing a counselor. And then um as my vision has gotten worse, it definitely, you get to sort of a plateau where you're like accepting things. You're like, okay, I can live with the vision that I have and I'm going to make it work. And then you realize it continues to get worse. So it's like then you fall off a cliff and you hit this downside, which
Hmm.
can lead to depression. And then you kind of get to another plateau where you're like, oh, okay, I'm good now. I'm good now. And then like you'll do something like walk into a door and you're like, damn it. Um, so it's like you have all these little dings that end up impacting how you see yourself, your self-esteem, um, your sense of self-efficacy, like you begin to become more dependent on others, and that's hard for some people. You stop when you can't drive anymore, that becomes challenging because most of society, you have to drive unless you live in like a major city. Um, it people are very car dependent. A
Hmm.
lot of public services can be really soul sucking
Hmm.
because
yeah.
um, there's a lot of people with all different disabilities, and they kind of group everyone into one category. And even if there is like paratransit in your area, like it takes you like 3 hours to get somewhere that's 10 minutes away because they route the paratransit in all these strange ways. Um, there's a lot that can be soul sucking about it. And
Hmm.
that's why I think it's so important to really bring that happens to the forefront and really validate that and say, yeah, this does happen. Because not only is there a stigma, I think, in society to having the vision loss, there's a stigma to feeling bad about it. But like, of course. And then you have people in the world who are like, oh, if I lost my eyesight, I'd kill myself.
Oh my
And
God.
what are you supposed to say to that? Like,
Yeah.
oh, well, I chose the other option. I mean,
Mm.
so it and people are entitled to have, I mean, I think you think it would, the only way I can make sense of that is like if I had perfect eyesight and I saw someone losing their eyesight, I'd say, oh, that would be really tough.
Mm.
Um, but I think you just have to do what you have to do. I mean, you
Yeah.
really, for me, the important thing is continuing to find my voice in the midst of the vision loss, because
Mm-hmm.
it's very easy to defer to other people. Like if I need to get a ride somewhere with someone and then they're like, yeah, but I feel like doing all my errands before I drop you off. It's very easy to take the back seat and go, oh, well, they're giving me a ride, so I'll just be nice and silently sit here for 4 hours while they do their errands. Where really, I need to be mindful and say, no, then I'd rather not get a ride with you, and just really not in a mean way, but recognize that I have some worth too,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
my time is worth
Yeah.
something too. And I think it's very easy to lose that.
Mm.
At least it has been for parts of my life where I'm like, well, I am losing my vision, so maybe I'm not worth as much as someone else. But like, no, why is that? So I
Yeah.
think that's just so important to talk about. And that's why I think the support groups are helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And can you talk a bit more about the support groups as well? Like, what kind of discussions do you have, and are there any themes that, commonly arise in them? Like any issues that
Yes.
people face?
Yeah. So the reason why you didn't ask this, but I'll just mention it anyway. The reason why I started the support groups, so as part of the Foundation Fighting Blindness a few years ago or a couple of years ago, they put out a what they entitled some sort of support group, but it was like for nationwide in the US. And they
Mm-hmm.
put you into breakout rooms where there were like 50 people, and in my breakout room anyway, and it was like a one-time thing.
Oh,
And I was like, this isn't a support group. This is like a one-time, you know, jam session or something. I don't
yeah,
know.
that sounds very
But I was
chaotic.
like, yeah, I was like, I don't feel comfortable talking in this huge group. So
Mm.
that's where I was like, you know what? Let's see if we can do something different. And so what I do each week is I open it. First of all, I come up with some talking points. Like I'll say, we're going to talk about empowerment this week, or we're going to talk
Mm-hmm.
about self-esteem, or we're going to talk about, something other than resources. Because like I mentioned, there's a lot of information about resources, but I try to stick to mental health type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I'll just send that out, and I'll say also, if anyone else has anything they'd like to talk about. Um, and people will sometimes write back and say, yeah, I saw this doctor and I'm interested in this treatment study or things like that. So resources will come into it, but I at least offer up a topic at the beginning where we're going to talk about, like, grief is another one, the grief and loss that we continually feel with vision loss.
Mm-hmm.
I had a grief and loss counselor come in and talk to people, and I think that resonated with a lot of the members. Um, things like that. So I loosely structure the group. I have topics, but I also want to make sure everybody can discuss whatever is on their mind.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
and yeah, I think so far it's been going pretty well.
Yeah, it's great to have a community like that, especially when you do feel if someone were to feel really isolated and alone, having that sense of community is definitely something that they appreciate. So yeah, super happy to hear that there's something like that
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm really happy that it's worked out, that I've had a good amount of people that come every time and they seem to be getting something out of it. So, I enjoy it.
Mm.
Not sure if
Hmm.
everybody else enjoys it, but it works for me.
I'm pretty
So
sure they do.
No, and I think it's a very good thing to have, And that you mentioned the other podcast that I was listening to, that a lot of people who have vision loss tend to feel isolated, right? And they just want to stay at home. They don't want to like connect with other people because they're like, oh, this will be a burden. This is too much work. So it's really
right.
important to have a sense of community where you can like talk
Mhm.
to people regularly about the issues that you're facing, but also feel motivated to just do the things that you want to in life.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, and you see that in like in the support group that I run right now, you see a mix of people who are more motivated to get out and make things happen. And then you see some people who are really um, kind of afraid to do that. And you see them kind
Hmm.
of pull each other up. And that's what you want to see,
Yeah.
um, which is good. So yeah, I'm going to start a second one for, like I said, the county where I live in, and I'm hoping that we have similar results and similar
Yeah.
people.
No, that's great. Um, there's like one other topic I kind of want to cover about this is about relationships, right? Um,
Mhm.
so as you were like losing your vision in your 20s, how did like that impact your relationships that you had with your family and friends, with your significant other, and like how did you deal with that?
Yeah, so that's an interesting topic because in terms of like romantic relationships, I was in a um significant romantic relationship from the time I was 22 till the time I was 29. And
Hmm.
um I felt like my partner at that time almost looked at me when he knew I had RP. He started treating me like I was like an old lady, like a delicate old lady. In
Oh.
that every time I walked outside, he's like, "Oh, are you okay? Let me like he tried almost to be like a guide dog for me, which at the time I didn't need.
Hmm.
And felt I didn't like it really.
Hmm.
And I mean, looking back on it, maybe I should have appreciated it more. But while I appreciated the sentiment, I didn't appreciate that how it made me feel really, because it made me feel
Yeah.
like I was a delicate old lady, and that's not what you want to feel when you're 22 to 29. And so that relationship ended, like I said, when I was 29, not just for that reason, but other reasons. And
Yeah.
then I was dating until like for the next 3 years till I met my current husband. And it's interesting because I would tell people that I don't drive at night and I didn't see well at night, but I didn't fully explain RP to people I would date.
Hmm.
And it kind of gives you an interesting indication of people's intentions, their sensitivity. It's almost like a good filtering out subject,
Hmm.
because at least for me, when I was looking for to get married, I was like, if a guy can't be sensitive, then that's a deal breaker. And if a guy treats me like an old lady, that's a deal breaker. And so you
Hmm.
kind of get a sense of how it gives you like an extra antenna as to the potential partner. And then but I also still was hiding the daytime vision loss part. So I remember when I was 32 or so, I went to some, and it does make it harder to date because a lot of dating and meetups happen in like dark bars or at night. And when you're night blind, that doesn't bode well for you.
Hmm.
So I think when I was like 32, I went to a meetup type of thing, and it was okay. And there was like an online community thing called like meetup.org or something like that. And I
Yeah.
went to an event, and I came home, and it was at night, and I came home and I was like, oh, this is just getting really tough. But then I met my now husband, and I think it sort of made me kind of fall for him more quickly because of the way he was like, he handled my vision loss. He didn't seem uncomfortable with it, I guess. Let's put it that way. Like
Yeah.
he helped me, but he wasn't like needy for me to need him.
Yeah.
And since then, like it has caused conflict. Like if I need him to guide me and he walks faster than me, like that becomes a conflict.
Yeah.
Or if like when we travel in an airport, and he gets anxious when he travels, and I'm like, he's rushing and I can't rush, and that becomes a little bit of an issue. So it definitely can add to conflict in relationship, but it also is a good filter
Yeah.
for finding the right person, because you get to know certain things about them more quickly.
Definitely.
In terms of my friends and family, so my family, like I think I mentioned my mom has RP, so they kind of understood her challenges, but they basically, she also, I think, hid her vision loss for a long period of time, so they sort of group me with her sometimes, which I don't love, but
Yeah.
it's just but for the most part, people are helpful and friendly, and want to do what they can to help. And then with friends also, they're very accommodating and friendly, and it just helps you be a little more wise about who you choose to spend your time with.
Do you have any dating advice for young people living with a disability by any chance? In terms
Oh my
of
God.
how about to find the right partner?
Oh, I wish I had the magic answer to that. Yeah, no, dating is tough for everyone, I
Yeah.
think. So, the only thing I can think of is if I were dating now, like if I were in my 20s and my eyesight's the way it is now, I would have to do more structured dates. Like I'd probably be on an app and talk to someone before they met me, and I would put it out there. I'd be like, look, this is the situation, and because you don't want to waste your time with someone who's going to have an issue with it, or someone whose expectations
Yeah.
are different. And in reality, there is nothing to be ashamed of. So I would just, that's what I would suggest, is talking to the person before you meet them in person, like on phone or FaceTime or whatever, and then making the first couple of dates more structured. So it's not, so you can plan to maybe have it happen in a space you're comfortable with, like a restaurant the layout of, or
Yeah.
something like that. That's what I would
So what
suggest.
you're suggesting is that like if you have a disability, it's better to tell like whoever like your potential date is beforehand so they can understand. And I mean, if they don't, like then it's like an automatic way. Like you don't really want to be with them in the long term.
That's what I would suggest,
Mm-hmm.
because as hard as that is at the beginning, it's much harder if you get invested and then you're like, oh, but this guy doesn't understand, or this person doesn't understand, or because if you want to eventually be in a long-term relationship with the person, you need to know that they get it, and that they are at what you need to do. Like I mentioned with my situation where I was treated like an old lady, like that's not the way I wanted to be treated. And you also don't want to be dismissed either, like, oh, you can do everything on your own, you don't need me at all for help, and like that would not work for me either. So you have to figure
Yeah.
out how your partner handles your challenges, and that they're supportive but not like dependent on you depending on them.
Yeah.
If that
Yeah.
makes sense. I mean, that's how it is for me. Everybody's different.
Yeah. I think it just takes a lot of trial and error as well. So you just got
It
to figure
is.
out what works. But yeah, I think like now we'll get to a final few questions because we have been running for a while. But yeah, do you have any advice for people who are like, have mental health issues or live with a disability and they don't know what to do with it, how to cope with those types of things and what they can do to improve their mental health?
Well, I definitely think seeking out support is the first thing, because it kind of makes you accountable to come out of the shadows if you're struggling with something. whether that's seeking out individual therapy or a group, finding a community. Another, just a strategy that's really helpful is investigating mindfulness and really focusing on just being in the present, recognizing that your emotions about the situation are not going to last forever. They'll come and go. Just like I said, when you're on a plateau and like, I can live with this. And then like you walk into something that you always knew was there anyway. And then you kind of fall off and you're like, oh, damn it. And then you get back to a plateau. Like things they'll go up and down. Emotions go up and down. And recognizing that's a part of life for everyone. And also focusing on what you can control. I think that's really helpful. Like you can, like for me, I can get a Lyft or an Uber. I can, go shopping online. I can, get out and go to yoga, and I can do these things. There are some things I can't do, but if you spend all your time focusing on what you can't do, then that's only going to make you feel worse. So, and gratitude is another good like counter to the negative. And I'll share, I had a particularly bad day a few weeks ago, and I was sort of just feeling sorry for myself. And then on my phone, there's a journal app, and it like brought up a notification that said, write in your journal or something. And I was like, well, doesn't hurt. So I opened it up, and then it gave me a prompt. It was like, what are you grateful for today? And it just totally took me out of my head. And I was like, yeah. That's so helpful. So things like that can be really helpful. And sometimes getting a therapist to help guide you through those types of things is really a good start.
Definitely. I think this is probably one of the last questions that I'll be asking you. We here at the Curious Coconut, we really like reading. Do you personally have a favorite book, or is there a book or audio book that you recommend to our listeners?
Well, I love the book Wherever You Go, There You Are by Jon Kabat-Zinn. I read that a while ago, and that's about mindfulness and about just being in the present and how helpful it is. I've just gotten into more and more like podcasts and audiobooks, because when I read print, like my eyes get tired really quickly. But also, podcasts are good just because they're like an hour or half an hour and then they're done. I tend to get bored with audiobooks. I don't know if that's just because of the adjustment to like, I play it and then like halfway through, I'm like, oh, this book is boring. Or if I just haven't found the right book yet, I don't know. But I've downloaded a bunch of them, and then I only get like halfway through. So
yeah, I feel like audiobooks are more of an investment because you just spend money to buy it. Whereas
yes,
podcast
For sure.
listen to online for free. And if you don't like the episode, just
exactly.
stop. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no
And then
commitment.
also you can search for whatever topic you're in the mood to listen to. Like there are podcasts about mindfulness, there are podcasts about celebrities, there are podcasts about I really am interested in learning about people. So I like interviews with people like celebrities, or wise words from people. And yeah, so I like
Yeah.
those types.
I think there's podcasts for everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, anything if you type in like blind mental health, there are probably tons of podcasts. And
Yeah. And is there anything that fascinates you about the future, about tech, or like where just the world is headed in general?
well, I'd like to think that tech is just going to be more and more refined to help those of us who have vision disabilities. It's come so far in like 5 years with the use of AI.
Yeah.
That's great. I only hope it gets better and better. I'm really excited about the new apps as I find out about them, like the OCO app where I can, auditorily hear about the change in pedestrian walk signals. That's great. And the Seeing AI, or the Be My Eyes AI feature, that's huge. I would love for there to be a good color reader app.
Mhm.
That seems to be like elusive. I don't know why. Maybe it's just hard just to tell the various shades of color, but there are a lot of like color reader apps that really say everything is gray. And I'm like, I know not everything is gray. So, um,
Yeah. Well, there's a business idea for any of our listeners. If you know, there's
Yeah.
a market for this. Just invent an app
yeah, there
that.
would be a huge market. And there are a lot of with vision impairments in the world. It's not like RP is a pretty rare disease, but when you
Mhm.
combine it with glaucoma or diabetic retinopathy or macular degeneration, there's a huge market. So,
Mhm. Yeah, there you go. You've heard it here first. But yeah, thank you, Leah, so much for coming to our show today. It was really lovely chatting with you. Lastly, like, do you want to share any like, plugs for anything you do personally, or if our viewers want to contact you? You don't have to share any of these details, but any final message you want to give to our viewers, you can say that now.
well, thank you for listening. I've enjoyed being here and yeah, I guess my final message for what it's worth is just, be kind. If you see someone who's struggling with a disability, just be kind to them and empathetic, and it makes such a world of difference.
Cool. Well, thank you. Thank you all for listening to the episode. Yeah, it was lovely chatting with you, Leah, and we'll catch you in the next one. See ya.